Hello there. How are you? I am so happy to be able to be talking to you today, wherever you may be. Here I am in my happy little office with lots of hope signs. My name is Karyn Harvey, and I'm a psychologist. I'm going to talk to you today about trauma-informed supports for people with intellectual disabilities. So I'm going to share my screen, and we will look at our PowerPoint, and we're going to watch a few videos. Not a lot of questions and answers because it's a recording, but hopefully you will get a lot out of this. That is my goal. So here we are. Trauma-informed supports for people with intellectual disabilities. And presented by me, Karyn Harvey. I have materials that are free, workbooks that you can use with people that you work with and support at karynharvey.org. And you can download quite a few materials. I have something called the happiness assessment, which you can use to help people become happy and figure out their bliss. I also have the daily happiness worksheet. So it's all free. Help yourself. There's books on Amazon, but they are not free. But I want you to feel free to download any materials that you might want to use with the folks you support. First, I want to say thank you. Thank you for choosing this important work. You are the best. You are the best. I so appreciate every single person who's made the decision to work in this field. You're supporting people who need the support, who have been invisible, who have been marginalized, who have been ignored in many cases, and yet you see them. And this is the kind of work you're choosing to do. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for the choice you have made and for the work that you are about to do or that you've been doing. Thank you. It says a lot about you. And that's my joy working in this field. There's so many wonderful, good-hearted people, and I've had the best coworkers that anybody could ever wish for. And the DSPs that I've worked with have been the most amazing people in my world, So welcome to the field. And if you're already here, thank you. We've been through a lot the last several years. For a while, a while ago, we had that lockdown, but that really affected people. And the trauma of COVID is very real. It isolated folks. Tragically, we lost a number of people with disabilities who passed away from COVID. We lost staff. And even though, time has passed, I think there's still a lot of grief that people are experiencing. A lot of anxiety now, not knowing what's going to come next. The world has changed, and that has really affected people with intellectual disabilities. It truly has. It's affected us, right? But people have experienced being isolated. They've experienced losing jobs, losing day programs, all kinds of things changed as a result of COVID, losing staff too, and housemates. So I think we have to be a little extra kind to each other and support each other through these recovery years and heal together. But let's talk uniquely about people with intellectual disabilities, because what we see is that trauma is actually the elephant in the room. So many people have experienced trauma who have intellectual disabilities. And why do I say that? Because we know there's been an amazing amount of sexual abuse. Joe Shapiro did a wonderful series on the sexual abuse of people with intellectual disabilities. And he was able to get this statistic that people are abused who have intellectual disabilities 7 times more than people without sexually. Nora Baladarian, a brilliant psychologist, did a piece of research with the Spectrum Institute where they interviewed over 700 people and asked them if they've been, who all have disabilities, and asked them if they had been physically, sexually, or financially abused. 70% said they had been abused. 90% said the abuse had been ongoing. And then there's bullying. Think about your years. I hate to bring this up for you, but middle school, junior high, right? Those 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Was there somebody who picked on you? Elementary school? You know, I think we've all been bullied at some point in our lives. Now think, do you remember somebody in your school with an intellectual disability? And what did they go through? Day to day. Think about that person. How many times were they laughed at? How many times were they picked on? Right? It affects you. You don't get used to it. We still remember what happened to us. You don't get used to it. And many of the people that you will be working with or that you are working with have a lot of trauma just from being bullied. And they've been excluded. Some of the older folks that you work with have been institutionalized, and there was so much maltreatment in the institutions. Horrible stories that you will hear, stories of sexual abuse, stories of physical abuse. So many stories. I worked with one guy and his whole life, his arm was like this. And I thought that was part of a genetic disorder. Found out when he was at Rosewood, a staff had broken his arm because he was fighting with other kids, because that's all they did all day. They didn't have school. They didn't have anything. He was dropped off by his parents there and never saw them again because the doctor told them that's the best thing they could do. And so he was fighting with another kid, and the staff stopped him and said, "Stop that," and grabbed him by the arm, and it broke. And then the staff said, "You're not going to see the doctor because I'll get in trouble." So for the rest of his life, his arm was like that. And he never wanted to take showers. Well, here's why. They used to line everybody up in the institution, and they had a big gymnasium with a drain in the middle. And I had seen that, and I was wondering why there was a drain there. Well, every night they just had everybody stripped naked and lined them up and hosed them down like they were cattle. Marched them across in a line, dried them off, gave them their clothes and their meds, and then they went into their cottages where they were just lined up. They didn't have their own rooms and just had to sleep next to each other, and then woken up the next morning. Treated like animals. Abused by each other, abused by staff. And there were good staff, there were good people there as well, but there were horrible conditions. So if you work with older folks who have been in the institution, know that it's almost as though they were in the Holocaust. It was so tough, so tough. And the abuse goes on, and tragically, it's actually increasing. So here's a report that was just issued by the Bureau of Justice for the statistics. So you can see people without disabilities and the sexual abuse, 15 out of 1,000, and then in 2012, and then people with disabilities, 26 out of 1,000 in 2012. 2017, it goes up a little bit, and it's a terrible thing that anybody endures sexual abuse. It's incredibly damaging, as we all know. But in 2017, 32.8 out of 1,000. 2019, 49.4 females and 42.7 males. It's just gone up and up and up, as though people have a target on their back. And this abuse affects them psychologically and emotionally quite a lot. So the chances are, when you're working with someone, that they've been sexually abused or physically abused or bullied or left out, that they've been through stuff. And back in the day, people used to say, well, because they have a disability, it doesn't affect them as much. Not true. It actually affects them more. They have what we call complex trauma, because it's almost never just one trauma. It's layer after layer after layer. And that's what you see. So, you know, I don't know if any of you watched the reality show Love on the Spectrum. These people have so much support from their families, right? They're in a reality show. They live in Australia. Life looks pretty good. And yet there was a little clip that I found on YouTube where they were talking about their experience of being bullied. And these are people, this is the cream of the crop in terms of being lucky, having good parents, having fortune. And I'm going to show this.
Do you think it's harder for people on the spectrum to find love and companionship?
Yes. We weren't born with manners like you are. We have to learn all our social cues.
I tend to overthink things a lot.
I have trouble with reading people's emotions and body language.
Too sharp noise can harm my brain.
I do have trouble socializing, maybe making decisions.
I have social anxiety. It's like you're in a room with lots of people and you're told that one of them has a knife. And if you talk to them, they will stab you.
It's like being in a transparent box. No one can hear you, well, they can see you, but they can't interact with you. You can bang on the wall, but you can't get out of it, so it's very lonely being in the box your entire life, because no one can get in and you can't get out, and no one can understand you.
I just want to share my life with someone very special and to show her that my disability is not an obstacle, that I'm capable of falling in love.
When I was a kid, I actually found it difficult trying to be friends with others.
I've been to 3 schools, so I always get bullied all the time.
There'll be pushing, there'll be name calling, there'll be people trying to take my hearing aid.
They figured that I was disabled, so it's easier to pick on me, I guess. Pick on the weak.
Well, I would just say in high school, it was more like I was just treated like dirt. There were these few girls who, they said I should ask this person out. I didn't realize it was a complete setup just so they could just reject me, just as a way of mocking me, really.
Didn't tell my mum that I got bullied because I always get these bruises on myself and that. Yeah.
I just wanted to get out of school, I just couldn't take it anymore. I had to get therapy because it was really dark times then.
Does it still affect you?
Yes. Oh yeah, the scars don't go away. The negative thoughts.
I think, being bullied have made me who I am. And if I wasn't bullied, I would have been someone completely different.
My autism, I feel it's what's given me my creativity.
It is harder having a disability and going through life with a disability, and you got to keep moving on with life. Like a phoenix, rise up again.
Because I've got a disability, I'm on the spectrum, people are always going to look at me as different from them, and I know I'm different from them, and that's fine, so if we're all the same, the world would be pretty boring.
Aw, ending on a high note there. But everybody you work with has probably been bullied. And I look at post-traumatic stress disorder as something that's on a continuum, meaning that you can have little degrees of it or a lot of it. We used to think it's an all or nothing thing, right? Well, you have PTSD or you don't. And then we used to think, well, it was only vets that had it. But now we're realizing that all these traumas that people go through, and sometimes it's the little traumas, what Francine Shapiro calls the little T's, still can cause post-traumatic stress disorder, still can affect you very deeply. So you're going to see it. You're going to work with people that maybe seem like they have a chip on their shoulder or are freaked out easily or don't trust anyone. These are all symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And what they need is someone who really shows care, who just shows them that they're safe. Doesn't mean you're going to be their best friend or you take them home and make them a part of your family, because chances are you're going to leave and that will only hurt them more. But that you are stable and supportive and encouraging and show them that you do care and that you believe in them and that you're a safe person in their life. That's so healing. And that's what people really need. So much of what people have been through, we don't see, right? So there's a study that shows the effects of neglect. So you might work with somebody who looks like they have a great family and everything's wonderful. Then you find out they were adopted. Maybe they were born into a chaotic situation where there was a lot of drug use or alcohol abuse, and we don't know what we don't know. And they may be expressing symptoms of trauma that happened early on, right? This is a reality. Or, you know, things changed in the home and it looks so good now, but there was a time when it was horrible, or there was abuse. And now we've learned a lot about the effects of neglect. They did a study in Bucharest called the Early Intervention Orphan Study, where they took children who were really being neglected. They were in Romania, in Bucharest, at an orphanage where they had very few staff, and they took half of them and they put them in a foster care program where they were really nurtured, like a good foster care program, where parents, at least one had to stay home and you had to really support that child. And then they left the other half, they just picked them randomly, and they left the other half in the institution where there were very few staff. They didn't get held, they didn't get encouraged, and only basic needs were met. And here's the result. Those kids left in the institution, 55% had some serious mental health disorder, like thought or mood disorder. And it went down to 35%, those who were nurtured. And this last column are those who were just left in their family home. Emotional disorders, 49% to 29%. So that went down too. Behavioral disorders were a little less because sometimes people just shut down. And interestingly for us, the average IQ of those neglected and left in that neglectful situation was 73 versus those who got put into foster care and nurtured, 85, a 12-point increase in IQ scores. So almost half had an intellectual disability who were neglected. And you will meet people, and you may already have met people who have an intellectual disability, but are really, really smart. Their brains can't organize and can't function because they've had so much trauma. The trauma impacts them. The trauma lowers their ability to perform on an IQ test, right? And they carry that with them. And these are people who know things. Every single person you work with has their own kind of awareness and intelligence. IQ has very little to do with intelligence. They're smart, and you know it, right? Once you start working with them, they're smart, and maybe they can't communicate in the ways that we do, or they can't, negotiate their way through the world in the ways that we do, but they know, and they know things, and they understand. So we need to talk to them as though they understand everything, because they do, and they're smart. And that trauma has impacted their way to express their intelligence in many cases, but it's there. And we saw in that study how the children that stayed in the institution actually had less brain matter. Their brains shrunk. There were more premature deaths. They had all kinds of problems. And neglect is very devastating. People need that interaction in order to be able to function. In order for your brain to be optimal, you have to have a lot of interaction as a baby and as a toddler. And when children are neglected, or there's a chaotic home or an abusive home, that interaction isn't happening in a way that it needs to for that person to be functioning on their highest level, So a lot of people have been through things we won't even know. And the abuse that they may have gotten during those years impacts their whole life. And what they need to know is that they're safe with you, that they're secure, that they're going to be okay. It's so important. The brain, we can divide up into 3 areas. If we look at the brain, we were wired to survive in the jungle, right? So back when we were cavemen, we had these 3 levels of brain that helped us survive. So we had our reptilian brain, which is just like responding, keeps the heart beating and everything. Then our limbic system, what they call the animal brain, actually, that's where our fight, flight, or freeze system is. It's our sympathetic nervous system, which reacts and helps us to react to danger. And then our parasympathetic nervous system, which will calm us down. And then we have the green part, which is our neocortex, or our smart brain, call that executive functioning, right? It's the smart part of our brain that plans things and thinks things out. And let's say we were hanging out as cavemen and we caught an antelope and it was so great. And we're having an antelope roast, you know, out in the fields. Things are good. We figured out how to get fire. Life is wonderful. Kids are running around. And all of a sudden a big furry thing comes and we've never seen one before. We're like, oh, what's that? Isn't that cute? But it's not that cute because it's a lion and it comes running up and it eats little Susie. Oh no, the lion ate Susie, and we don't know what that furry creature is. And we just respond, right? We get the other kids and we run. Somebody maybe tries to kill the lion, but the lion's gone. Then a couple weeks later, there we are hanging out in the forest again. Now, the yellow part of our brain has a thing called the amygdala, or what they call is the implicit memory. It takes pictures of anything really important, anything really dangerous or emotionally strong. It might even be something good, but it takes pictures and then it will send a red alert to the rest of the brain if there's danger. So in that yellow system, we kind of have our high alert part of our brain. And when it sees something dangerous, it shuts down the green part of the brain because that's not the time to sit around planning and analyzing. So for example, let's say we're back 3 weeks later and now we caught a wild boar. Life is good again. Poor Susie, but hey, the rest of the kids are happy and we're roasting the boar. And all of a sudden, another furry creature comes. Now we have a name for it. That's a lion. And the strongest cavemen grab some sticks and rocks and go to kill it. That's the fight, right? Remember, when that amygdala flashes, it triggers our fight, flight, or freeze system, as many of you may have heard about, right? Fight, flight, or freeze. So some go to fight the lion because they don't want any more kids killed. They don't want anyone killed. And some take the other kids and run. Everybody responds. And our smart part of our brain, our neocortex, that's the part that plans, is not sitting there thinking, is that the same lion as the one last time? Or is this a relative? Are those markings the same? No, you can't sit around thinking at those times. You got to respond. So the yellow part of the brain, that limbic system, or that implicit memory, is a piece in that limbic system called the amygdala, right? The amygdala also fills up that whole being with adrenaline and cortisol. First, the whole brain gets filled up, then the whole body gets on high alert, and you can run faster and fight harder and do what you need to do to stay safe. So this system of high alert shuts down your smart brain and gets your whole body moving so you can fight or you can run. And if you're a tiny little caveman, maybe you want to freeze and look like you're dead because lions don't eat dead animals. We're the only ones that do because we figured out how to cook again. We've got the fire and everything. Now we've got the, Food Network and you name it, we've got it down. So this worked really well when in our early years, right? But before we had this elaborate world. Now, when our amygdala flashes and we think we're in danger and we want to fight someone, we get in trouble. We might get arrested. Bad things happen. So the same goes on with the folks that we support. They may think they're in danger and we don't know. Sometimes they're triggered by the slightest thing. I work with one guy. Every time the program manager walked in the room, he would start screaming and flipping tables. And we were like, what's the matter, Dan? What's the matter? He was fine otherwise. And we finally figured out it was her, but she never did a thing to him. But then we realized he'd been in Rosewood at the institution for 40 years, and somebody must have done something to him that looked like her. So we had to make sure that he never saw her. By the way, this is my cat, Jojo. Say hi, Jojo. Oh, I guess he's not saying hi right now. But so that fight, flight, or freeze gets triggered in ways we don't even know. And some of our folks that we support are very shut down because they're so afraid. They've seen so many bad things. They're just trying to hide, right? Others are maybe having all kinds of responses that we don't expect, like fighting with us when they don't mean it. And then afterwards, they're so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And we see that fight, flight, or freeze. We also see people getting very needy. Janina Fisher says your attachment issues will come up, meaning people might start clinging to you. I need you, I need you, I need you. They may withdraw from you, or they may become very ashamed, like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm a bad person, I'm a bad person. You might see all these responses. They're trauma responses. And you might think, well, they just want attention. No, so much of the things we see are based on what people have been through in the past. And when they don't feel safe, it all comes out. So our job is to help them feel safe and secure and supported so they can move forward in their life, right? Interestingly enough, when the amygdala, when you've had a lot of trauma growing up, many people have enlarged amygdalas, studies have shown, meaning that part of the brain that is that implicit memory that gives the danger signals will be sending danger signals very easily at the slightest little hint of danger. Boom, 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 right? And so they may seem like they have a chip on their shoulder, or they're so easily triggered, or what's wrong. That's because of their past trauma. And they benefit a lot when they can get therapy and support. So the amygdala becomes enlarged, and then what shrinks is the working memory, or the hippocampus. So the part of your brain that helps you to learn things and apply them is your working memory. And when you've had a lot of trauma, it shrinks and it doesn't work that well. Again, further evidence that a lot of people with intellectual disabilities have had so much trauma that their brains just can't remember things or organize themselves in ways that will help them to do their best. And what they need is to have that healing experience of feeling safe, feeling good about themselves, and being able to move their lives forward. I once heard Temple Grandin speak, and she showed us a slide of her brain, and she said, my amygdala is enlarged. This is the brain of someone with autism. And that's when I began to realize that so many people with autism have had so much trauma from the bullying, from not being able to communicate, from all they've been through, that it's been constant traumas, enough to really impact their brain physically. So we have trauma responses versus behavioral response. When we talk about behavioral responses, we talk about people doing something on purpose because they want something. Okay, they want attention, or they're trying to tell you something, or they're trying to get out of something, or they want stimulation. But when and that may happen, but more often than not, what we see is people really demonstrating their trauma and their pain and showing us what they've been through. And they may not trust you when you first start working with them, because maybe you look like someone that was abusive to them, or maybe other staff just left them or did things to them. And you may find yourself struggling to win their trust, but if you're consistent, you will win their trust, and you will see the behaviors reduce in all likelihood. If they're trauma-based, you'll see a difference. 4 symptom areas of post-traumatic stress disorder. You see re-experiencing, people have intrusive memories. I don't know if you know anyone who talks all the time about someone who died. I see this a lot when folks with disabilities lost a parent, and that parent in their mind was the only person who ever really cared about them. They will talk over and over again about their death. My mother died, my mother died, my mother died. And you think it just happened because it's so raw for them, but then you find out it happened 20 years ago or 10 years ago. They're in a loop of re-experiencing, and that's a symptom of post-traumatic stress disorder, where it just is what we call the past is present, right? It's fresh for them. It keeps coming up. People have nightmares, people have flashbacks, and they're in this loop of re-experiencing. And they have to know that they're okay now. They have to have an active life, because if there isn't enough going on for people, they're just going to sit around and re-experience their trauma. That's why we need lots of activities, lots of engagement. People need to be engaged and have things to do. There's Jojo. Before he pulls the cord of my computer, which he's done before. I know he's a giant, but he's actually still a kitten. Almost, he's not even a year old. Okay, enough about the cat. Avoidance. You'll see people shut down. You'll see people obsess about things because they're so worried. What is my schedule? Who's working with me today? Or what do I do tomorrow? And they get in this loop of obsession. That's a symptom of trauma as well, where they get very disconnected and withdrawn. We have what's called negative alteration in cognition and mood. That's another name for just this terrible sense of doom. Also, people can feel shame. Bad things happen to me because I'm a bad person. Everything is my fault. Or they're very depressed because they say nothing good will ever happen to me because I know I have a bad life. And we say, oh, guess what? You're going to King's Dominion, or we're going to Busch Gardens. And they say, oh, the van will break down. It always does. They can't be happy about anything, right? And this is because they feel, because so many bad things happened to them in the past, that it will never stop happening. I work with this one fellow who was sexually abused, and he said to me, why do I always feel like I'm a bad person? Why do I feel like all the abuse was my fault? And that was what we had to work on the most in our therapy, because he blamed himself. He had this sense of shame, and he was sure no one would ever want to be with him, that no staff would stay with him, all from this horrible abuse that he endured. Arousal, that last symptom area, is where people are in a state of agitation. You will see people who get flipped out, they're freaking out, they're destroying property, or they're fighting. And you think they're doing it for some reason or to get something, but they don't get anything out of it. And then they feel horrible afterwards. Most of the time, that's because they're in a state of hyper arousal, because they're freaked out because something triggered that amygdala. Something said, you're in danger, you have to fight, you have to defend yourself, or you better break things and show people how you feel. It's trauma related. It's trauma related. I work with one fellow, he broke 3 computers and 4 phones during COVID because he kept thinking he was going to get it and die. He would freak out. This wasn't for attention. It wasn't to get out of things. It was because his amygdala was filling him up with chemicals and flashing danger signals. And then he was in a state of hyper arousal. And he felt horrible every time he broke something. Afterwards, he'd say, I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I do this. Why do I do this? There's a lot of impulsivity, right? They just do things. And people go from 0 to 100 in half a second. These are based on trauma that they've experienced. And then they are triggered and their amygdala is telling them, you're in danger again. You better protect yourself. I have been in this field for 34 years. And 99% of the aggression I've seen has been based on fear, not on a deliberate intent to hurt anyone. Same with the property destruction. Same with all of this, that people are just freaking out and not feeling safe. And if we inadvertently threaten them in ways that, we don't mean to, but they feel threatened, it gets worse. So safety is the key. There's a great quote from Stephen Hawking: the greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it's the illusion of knowledge. And that's the thing. That's the thing, that I've made many mistakes. I'm going to be totally open. I've written some really bad behavior plans because I've rewarded people for not doing a behavior that they couldn't control. They needed to know that they were safe. And the minute they felt triggered, they were just going to do what they were going to do. And I would say to the staff, tell them they're going to lose their soda if they throw that chair. And they'd throw the chair and punch the staff. And it was my fault because that was the last thing they wanted to hear. Nobody wants to lose a soda. I thought I knew. And then I learned about trauma. And now I see it's so important for us to have relationships with people as we learn in MANT. Make that connection. Help them to feel that you're safe. Help them to trust you, to know that your intentions are good, that you're there for them. And that means talking to people all the time. Just telling them, explaining things to them, telling them about yourself, telling them that things are cool. Give them reassuring language as much as you can. Reassure, comfort, encourage. Even when people don't use words, chances are they're understanding you. And to talk to that part of them that knows, because it's there. That's what we see so much in autism. William Stillman talks about autism, and he says, there's exquisite sensitivity and unseen intelligence. And that's why I'd like to quickly show this video to you, which I think is so impactful, made by people with autism about what they've been through. And they talk about at some point the effects of restraints and how it affects them. Here we go.
Content warning. This film contains a description of the experience of being restrained. This section of the film has a warning immediately before it and is filmed in black and white to make it easy to skip past if you decide not to watch it.
Hi, I am Grant Blasco, a college-bound high school senior.
My name is Jordan Zimmerman. I communicate by typing on an iPad.
My name is Endeavor, and I'm a multimodal communicator.
Hi, I'm Isaiah Graywall from Canada. I type and spell to communicate.
We are all autistic and we are unable to rely on speech to be understood. Most of us are non-speaking. Some of us can speak a little, or from time to time. People have a lot to say about us. They write stories and biographies. They produce plays and make movies about us. But they are not listening to us.
Just because I cannot speak does not mean I don't hear. I hear everything people say to me or about me. I may not show understanding in my face, but I know and understand. Not a word said escapes my so strong ears.
We may be non-speaking and need help with many things, but that doesn't mean we can't contribute to a book, a play, or a movie. If you always leave us out, people think we are not able to participate. That's why most people don't realize that we have a contribution to make. Include us, and you will see that we have so much to give.
To anyone who wishes to represent non-speaking people, I ask that you communicate with us directly. Misrepresentation of non-speaking people leaves us more vulnerable to abuse.
I should not be left out of conversations or presumed incompetent, simply because I don't rely on spoken language.
There needs to be more representation of diverse autistic identities.
The media often shapes how we view ourselves and how others around us view and esteem our place in society. When there is lack of representation or improper representation, it directly feeds into the internalization of stigma, where your membership in a group is the very cause of your negative self-esteem, feelings of inferiority and even feelings of self-hatred.
If your story says there's no hope, people may not realize how many of us can share solutions about how to support non-speaking children and adults. People who write about us tell the world what they think is best. Other people who follow their example could hurt us rather than help us. To be treated like a child just because you can't communicate in the usual ways is humiliating and traumatic.
The way to demean me is to speak to me as if I am a baby.
I don't like people talking about me like I am not there.
Some books and movies include scenes of restraint. These can be painful to watch. You may want to fast forward the next few seconds that are in black and white, where an autistic survivor talks about his experiences with prone restraint.
Every escalation was blamed 100% on me, no matter if they had just done something illegal to me, cornered me, taunted me, taken something I needed, whatever. Your body is tensing up. Your breathing tightens up. Your fists want to clench. You can feel your body betraying you. You can fight or fold. It's up to you. You are hitting the ground either way. You are face down on the floor. You may relax, you may beg, you may play dead. None of it works. If you show pain, they will show you more pain. I thought I was suffocating and I called out to say so, and they laughed. The way people who use restraint talk, you might think it is an almost surgical procedure. It's not. It is a fight with a predetermined winner, who isn't you.
How do we get it right? Consult non-speaking autists from the start and at key points throughout your project. Read our blogs and books. Watch our movies and videos. Learn about our lives.
If you have a voice, you can use it to help bring dignity back for the members of the more marginalized autistics. Let's change the plot lines and the narratives around non-speaking autistics so more and more are allowed to be visible in society and avail of opportunities in all kinds of areas. Then we will truly see more and more non-speaking autistic actors who will be able to provide us with more positive and authentic representations.
Ask us. Listen to us. Nothing about us without us.
Thank you so much. Isn't that amazing? That was made by people with autism, and that's why it's important to me to show it. What can we do to help people heal? 3 things that are so important in order for people to be able to heal from their trauma. Number 1, as I've been telling you, they need to perceive themselves as safe. They need to see you as safe. That means you talk to them, you encourage them, they don't feel threatened, you say supportive things. Praise goes a long way. Just praise their character. You're a good person. What a wonderful thing to hear from someone. It makes you feel safe. Connections. We learn a lot about that in MAND, building that relationship. But more importantly, what I'd really love to challenge each one of you to do is to help them to have peers that are friends. Help them to have someone over, for dinner. Help them to go to the movies with somebody, as long as we're not in another lockdown. Hopefully not. Help them to be able to have their own friends who aren't going to get another job and go away, friends who aren't paid. And that's something you can do. You can teach them those skills and you can support them with those skills. And empowering people, which means real choices, helping them to have real choices and not fake choices, helping them to have some sense of control over their life. Yeah, they can't choose everything, but when we are talking about person-centered thinking, not just a plan that sits in a book or is on a computer, but a person-centered approach means we're really trying to rack our brains. What does this person want? What's important to them, right? So these 3 ingredients, helping them to feel safe, helping them to have connections to people, to have friends, have relationships, and helping them to be able to have some power over their life, some ability to choose, all help folks to heal. And these are critical ingredients for healing, and it's something you can do. You can be that safe person and help them to feel safe in their world. You can help them to make more friends, to have more connections, and you can enable them to have some real choices to really be able to move their own life forward in the position that you're in. Really, you're the most important person in the entire agency because you're the one who can do this. Relationships heal people. These 2 gave me their permission to talk about their relationship and how much it helped. And this beautiful lady, she lost her father. It was very hard for her. And she really tanked when that happened and needed a lot of support to go back to work, to do anything. And then she had one more relative left who was very important to her. And then that person died. But at that point, she had already started a relationship with her boyfriend. We all thought, oh no, things are going to fall apart again. She's not going to go to work. She's not going to want to do anything. But she said to us, I miss my aunt, but I got my boyfriend and he loves me. Love is the most powerful thing in the world, isn't it? The healing power of relationships. There's so much data now on the fact that people in healthy relationships heal from their trauma. Yet so many folks with disabilities don't have the chance to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And that's up to us. We can teach them the skills. We can help them to connect. This is a beautiful thing we can do. We can support love, dating. We can teach people. It makes all the difference in the world. There was a study done with people who had severe PTSD from Iraq, who were vets in Iraq, where they came back and they couldn't even function in their lives. And they found that there were some people that had the same horrible things happen to them, but they were okay. They didn't have severe PTSD. And they did this very intense study to look at what was the difference. And what they found were was that the people who went through horrible things but didn't develop the same PTSD as the people who did, those people had a lot of friends and family supporting them. They were Skyping with them. Back then they weren't FaceTiming, but they were able to Skype, they were able to talk all the time. Whereas the people that had the most severe PTSD, like maybe developed an addiction, lost jobs, couldn't resume their life, and had lots of symptoms, they had very few people that they were talking to. They reported having very few friends, very few family members supporting them. And then that was number one factor. Number two factor was if they had friendships and connections inside of their unit. And if people said, I don't trust the people in my unit, they're not really my friends, they were much more likely to have PTSD than those who said, we're really tight and I trust them and they have my back and I have theirs. Human relationships are the most important thing. That's what heals us. That's what gives our lives meaning. That's what moves us forward. And people with disabilities are too isolated. This has to change. The loneliness is the biggest problem. David Petoniak says that of all the issues in our field of people with intellectual disabilities, the worst one is the loneliness and the isolation. And COVID made it worse. And now we're emerging from that, but let's support relationships. Let's help people to find that special someone who's not paid, who's going to value them as much as they value that person. So important, and it's how people heal. Access to therapy is a human right. I believe that that's a big piece of healing, and yet it's very hard to find therapists who understand that they can do their therapy with folks with disabilities. There's a few out there, and my job is to convince people that they can do this. I'm working on it. I give talks to therapists. I do everything I can to build that bridge because I believe that it's so important and it's a human right. And our folks benefit from therapy. Right now, I'm working with someone who only uses 5 to 10 words. And yet through music, through art, we're processing the sexual abuse that he had. And he was having all kinds of behavior problems after the abuse happened. And now, since the therapy, he's not having those problems. Behavior plan wasn't working, nothing was working, but just having him talk about it, dance about it, move, and me talking to him, he's responding now, he's saying more. He says, I'm safe now because his abuser went to jail. Thank goodness it was a stepfather in his own home. And he's healing. And this is everybody's right. The right to access mental health treatment. The right to be somebody, to have a sense of identity, a sense of purpose. I think that's so critical. People need to be someone. During our teenage years, adolescence is when we're developing that sense of who we are. Maybe you find out you're good at sports. Oh, I'm this kind of person. Or good at art. Oh, I'm an artsy person. But so many people with disabilities during that period, they were finding out what they were not. Oh, I'm not going to have a high-paying job. I'm not going to college. I'm not driving. I'm not going to get married and have kids. They're being given that message over and over again about what they're not. So that's why I believe it's important for all of us to build a positive sense of self. It's never too late for people to find what they are. Who am I? And I have many workbooks on my website that you can use for free and do it with people. My book, To Celebrate Me, helps build up a sense of self. And just you can do this. Talk to them about who they are. Help them find new hobbies. Help them engage in their life. And then becoming somebody and having a sense of self is another important path to healing. And that's how we all heal from trauma, when we get that identity, not just being a victim, but being somebody who's stronger and capable to move forward in your life. So we want to support a positive sense of identity. You know, who am I? This is not the lion that ate little Susie. But what matters most is how you see yourself, right? And if we can hold that positive mirror up to people and help them see their best self, they can truly heal. Daisaku Ikeda, a great Buddhist scholar, is there with Nelson Mandela, right, who changed the world. And Nelson Mandela, you know, he had more trauma than anyone else. He was in prison for 27 years. He had trauma before that. And yet he knew who he was. He had a sense of self. And that sense of self helped him to recover from his trauma and impact the world. Not only did he change South Africa, he changed the world. And Ikeda, this great Buddhist philosopher, says, ultimately, happiness rests on how you establish a solid sense of self or being. And that's where people can become happy, knowing who they are. And so our job is to help them to have lots of different activities, lots of ways that they can discover who they are, that they can enjoy themselves. They can say, oh, wow, I'm somebody who can, you know, do art, and I'm somebody who swims, and I'm somebody who has a girlfriend, or I'm someone who has a boyfriend. Self-exploration is a part of developing who they are. And this is something we can do to help people to heal from their trauma. We can hold up a mirror that shows two possible things. We can tell people what's wrong with them all day long. Your bad behavior. Are you going to be bad today? Don't be bad today. Just showing them everything that's wrong with them. Or we can hold up a mirror saying, look, you're a great guy. Oh, we're going to do this activity. It's going to be so fun. It's going to be wonderful. You can do this. Show them their best self. Praise that self. Encourage them. It goes so far. It makes such a difference. And then finally, we want to develop their happiness. I have on my website the happiness assessment. Let's explore following our bliss. We all need to have happiness, right? And happiness is something you have to work on. It doesn't always come naturally, but it's pleasure, engagement, relationships, having a sense of achievement, and having purpose and meaning. And this is something everyone in the world is entitled to. Happiness. So if you focus on working with someone on, you know, exploring what makes them happy, on trying out different things, on engaging in their life, they're not going to be re-experiencing their trauma. They're not going to be breaking everything inside. They're not going to be attacking people. They're not. Happy people don't put holes on the wall. Happy people are excited because they're looking forward to the future. And you're the one that can make all the difference. So my new favorite poet, Amanda Gorman, says, there is always light if only we are brave enough to see it, and if only we are brave enough to be it. You the person working with this wonderful person you're supporting, you're the one that's the light in their life. You bring that light by showing them who they can be, by helping them to have relationships, by helping them to see themselves in a different light, not just the person with a disability, but somebody who is someone. That's you. And you can make all the difference in the world by doing that and help them to heal. You can bring them into the here and now, and they can have hope. And hope changes everything. We all need hope. And when you have hope, you heal. And that's the good news, that healing happens. And here's the references. We always have to have that. So I want to just say thank you so much. You have been wonderful listening to me, seeing my cat, enjoying my slides, but thank you for the difference you make and the difference you're going to make.